Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Picture this. You're the head coach of an NFL team, and you just made it to the playoffs. After a long, hard season, you're one of the lucky teams that gets to play late December and possibly January football, and you have a shot at winning the Super Bowl, reaching the pinnacle of the sport. However, there's one small problem. You can't exactly prepare for your upcoming game because you have no idea who you're going to be playing. And the reason why is because your two possible opponents are tied in the standings. And in the NFL's tiebreaker system, nothing can break the tie. You have to wait on a coin flip to figure out who you're going to be facing. Something like that seems ridiculous, right? You're going to be depending on a coin flip to figure out who you're going to be playing and where the game is going to be? Well, as crazy as that might sound, that came dangerously close to happening once. In 1975, we almost had a coin flip determine the playoff matchups in the NFC. And this is the story behind what might just be the strangest tiebreaker scenario in NFL history. Before I talk about the scenario in question, we need some context to understand how we got to this point. And for longtime viewers of the channel, you might be thinking to yourself that a coin flip determining the postseason seems familiar. And that's because it is, and it plays a big part in our story with regards to what eventually happened in 1975. To fully tell this story, we have to go back to the start of the decade as we head to 1970. It was the first year of the merger, but more importantly, it was the first year that wildcards would make the postseason. Because there were 3 divisions in each conference, the 4th spot would be determined by whichever non-division winner had the best record. The tie-breaking system in the NFL was not complex at all. There were only 2 tiebreakers used. The first one was head-to-head record, and the second one was record within the conference. To say that the NFL didn't think this through at all when they were implementing the wildcard would be an understatement, because there was a highly likely scenario where 2 teams, who wouldn't play each other in the regular season, could have the same conference record and be tied, with no other on-field metric being used to break the tie. That meant that if 2 teams with the same record and no prior meetings had the same record within the conference, that the tie would be broken by a coin flip. Because that's exactly how you want to determine playoff spots. You want to do it with a coin flip. Sure enough, the very first year of this format, this exact scenario almost happened. It was so close to happening, in fact, that one Milwaukee lawyer threatened to sue the NFL. Fortunately for everyone involved, when the New York Giants lost to the Los Angeles Rams on the final day of the season, the crisis was averted. However, if the Giants beat the Rams, then the Giants would have won the division, and the final playoff spot between the Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions would have been decided by an untelevised coin flip, since both the Cowboys and Lions finished with a record of 7-4 in the NFC. Naturally, the league added more tiebreakers after that season to try and prevent something like that from ever happening again. That was the Cliff Notes version, or the Spark Notes version, or whatever you want to call it, of what went down that year. If you want to learn more about the craziness of the 1970 season with that tiebreaker, then click the card in the upper right corner. But while the NFL may have thought it was out of the woods by adding more tiebreakers, 5 years later, they almost found themselves in the exact same pickle. There were 3 teams in the NFC back in the 1970s that you could bet your life on making the postseason every single season, and you'd be pretty safe every year. Almost how nowadays in college football, you can know nothing about the sport and still pencil Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State into the playoff, with the 4th spot being the only real spot up for grabs. Back in the 1970s, you could pretty much pencil in the Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings, and Los Angeles Rams for playoff spots. Unsurprisingly, these 3 teams are the teams involved in the controversy that we're about to see unfold. Before I talk about those teams though, we need to take a quick moment to explain the rule change that happened in the offseason that led to this drama happening in the first place. From 1970 to 74, no tiebreakers were even necessary to determine playoff seeding. In what can only be described as an absolutely stupid rule that didn't have a whole lot of business existing, there were no seeds. The postseason matchups and host sites were determined on a rotating basis. This meant that instead of the 1 seed playing the 4 seed and the 2 seed playing the 3 seed, you could have a 13-1 division winner going on the road to play a 12-2 division winner, while a 9-5 division winner hosts a wild card. It also led to the insane situation where in 1972, the Miami Dolphins, despite going undefeated, had to play the AFC Championship on the road in Pittsburgh, and a situation that same year where the San Francisco 49ers, despite having the worst record of any playoff team at 8-5-1, got to host a playoff game, while the Green Bay Packers, who also won their division and went 10-4, did not. Fortunately, in 1975, that rule was scrapped, and it led to the system that's in place today, where the division winners are seeded by record, and then the wild cards are seeded by record, although back then, the wild card would just be slotted into the number 4 seed. And in 1975, that wild card happened to be the Dallas Cowboys. After surprisingly missing the postseason the year before in 1974 with a disappointing 8-6 record, making it the first time since 1965 that Dallas was on the outside looking in with the playoff field, they bounced back in 1975 by going 10-4, ending the season by winning 5 of their final 6 games. While this record wasn't enough to beat the St. Louis Cardinals for the division lead, as the Cards went 11-3 and took the NFC East for the second straight season, it was enough to get the wild card. Now comes the moment of truth. Who are the Cowboys playing? Would they be playing the 2-loss champions of the NFC West in the Los Angeles Rams, or would they be playing the 2-loss champions of the NFC Central in the Minnesota Vikings? Turns out, no one really knew. Entering the final week of the season, the Vikings were 11-2 and the Rams were 11-2. On Saturday, December 20th, both of these teams would be in action to close out the regular season. The Vikings would travel on the road to take on the Buffalo Bills, who were already out of the playoff hunt and were playing for absolutely nothing. And the Rams would host the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were also playing for nothing as they won the number 1 seed in the AFC already. It was expected that both the Vikings and the Rams would win their games, and both of these teams would finish the season 12-2. So how would the league determine who gets the number 1 seed and home field advantage throughout the postseason, and who gets the number 2 seed? Enter the incredibly confusing and awful tiebreaker system that still didn't really clear anything up. The first tiebreaker is head-to-head record. Unfortunately, that doesn't really help us out in this instance, as the Vikings and Rams did not play each other that season. That takes us to the second tiebreaker, which is wins in the conference. Neither of the Week 14 games matter for this tiebreaker, since both games involve the opponents in the AFC. The Vikings finished the season with an 8-2 record against the NFC, while the Rams finished the season with a 9-2 record. That should mean that because the Rams had the better winning percentage, they would get the advantage over the Vikings, right? Well, not quite, because as you can probably tell, the Rams played one more game against the conference than the Vikings did, and that wouldn't be fair to punish the Vikings like that for something that was entirely out of their control. For some inexplicable reason, the NFL made it so that there was a high chance, due to the unbalanced nature of the schedule, that the first and second tiebreakers would be completely meaningless, as was the case here. That takes us to the third tiebreaker, which was point rating in conference play. If you have no idea what point rating is, buckle up, because this is an absolutely bizarre way to break a tie. It's going to sound confusing at first, so just bear with me for one moment, and hopefully it will all make sense in a bit. There are 13 teams in the NFC. Each team in the conference is ranked on offense and on defense. If you have the best offense in the conference by points scored, you get 1 point. If you have the worst offense, you get 13 points. It goes in inverse order. Then the same thing happens with defense, with the best defense in terms of points allowed getting 1 point, and the worst defense getting 13 points. You add the scores from the offense and the defense to get your total point rating. This only applied to conference games, and just like golf, the low score wins. Minnesota had the third best offense and second best defense in conference games, which comes out to 5 points. Los Angeles had the fourth best offense and the best defense in conference games, which also comes out to 5 points. 3 tiebreakers in, and nothing was being settled, and we were coming dangerously close to running out of tiebreakers. There was only one tiebreaker left, which was point rating across all 14 regular season games. However, the rating didn't apply across all 26 teams, but rather just across the 13 teams in the NFC. Entering the final week of the season, the Vikings had scored 342 points, which was the top total in the conference. They allowed 167 points, which was the second best total. That gave the Vikings 3 points in this tiebreaker, which is one off of the best possible score. If the Rams could find a way to tie the Vikings in this department, then there would be no other tiebreakers left. It would come down to the dreaded coin flip, which was the last thing Pete Rozelle and company wanted after the near disaster that happened half a decade before. With the Rams, they entered the week with 302 points scored, which was the 5th best in the conference. However, they entered the week having allowed just 132 points in 13 games. Their defense was absolutely dominant. They'd allowed 12 points in their last 3 games combined, and just 29 points in their last 5 games. In the most recent game, a 22-5 victory over the Green Bay Packers, they held Green Bay to just 9 first downs and 170 yards of total offense. Right now, they had 6 points in the tiebreak, and there was a very possible but highly complex way for the Rams to force a coin flip. Los Angeles entered the week only 10 points behind Dallas in total offense and 20 points behind Washington. If they could get past Dallas and finish with the 4th best offense, they combined with the best defense, they finished with 5 points. If they got past Washington, it could even be 4 points. Then the St. Louis Cardinals entered the week 10 points behind the Vikings, and Washington entered the week 20 points behind the Vikings. If both teams could surpass Minnesota, which could happen if the Vikings had an off day, then the Vikings would have the 3rd best offense and the 2nd best defense, also finishing with 5 points. A historic day offensively for Washington, either good or bad, would help the Rams out a ton. Now, it would be one thing if the tiebreak was this complex because of a set of unusual circumstances, like what we saw in 1997 with the AFC Central between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Pittsburgh Steelers, where we had to go to a fifth tiebreaker because the Jags and Steelers were tied in every single category. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But the fact that you have to do complex math like this and practically have to do calculus to figure out who's going to be the number one seed because you made a system so poor that the first two tiebreakers mean nothing at all, and this is all you have to go off of, is ridiculous. And that raises the question, how the heck did this convoluted mess end? Fortunately for everyone involved, the Vikings put everything to rest by beating the Bills handily on Saturday afternoon. The only real way for the Rams to have a shot at forcing the coin flip was for the Vikings to lay an egg offensively and hope that the Cowboys and Cardinals could surpass them. That was not happening after Minnesota dropped 35 points on the Bills. By scoring 35 points, it would have forced the Cardinals to score 45 and Washington to score 55, and that probably wasn't going to happen. It was one of those games where the Vikings knew the situation at hand, knew they needed to score points, and did just that. And even though the Rams won their game that night against the Steelers, they only won it by a final score of 10-3. While it was another fantastic showing by their number one defense, it was not enough to overtake anyone offensively. The Rams finished the season with 6 points in that tiebreaker, and the Vikings finished it with 3. After all of that, the Vikings finished as the winners of the number one seed in the NFC, getting a home field advantage and getting to take on the Dallas Cowboys in the divisional round. It also meant that the Rams would get to host the St. Louis Cardinals. However, while the Rams may have lost the battle, they won the war. The Rams took care of the Cardinals 35-23 in their playoff match, thanks to forcing Jim Hart to throw 2 pick-sixes in the first half, and thanks to a 202-yard rushing performance by Lawrence McCutcheon. And the Vikings, well, you probably know how that one ended. One of the most heartbreaking losses of all time. And as you can probably expect, the NFL completely changed the playoff tiebreaking system in 1976. They added 3 tiebreakers having to do with point differential, and completely scrapped the point rating system. And like most things in life, change happens for a reason. And the reason that the system was scrapped was because of the chaos that happened in 1975 and how dangerously close we were to having a coin flip decide the postseason. We have so many tiebreakers in place today that for the playoffs to come down to the flip of a coin is almost impossible, and will likely never happen. But in 1975, in what might just be the strangest tiebreaker in NFL history, that was definitely not the case. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGear9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.